A company pays $200. Not per day, not per month, per year. For that money, it pumps hundreds of millions of gallons of water out of the ground beneath a town. Then it sells that water back to the people who live above it. $1 a bottle, sometimes more. Stop and run that math. The water was already under their feet. They owned it as much as anyone did. And now they're buying it back for roughly 200 times what the water actually costs to pump. 200 to 1. Keep those two numbers apart, by the way. $200 is the yearly permit. 200 to 1 is the markup. Different things that happen to share a number. So here's the question. This whole video is going to pay off. Whose water was that? And how did pumping it get so absurdly cheap that the permit for it costs about what you'd pay for 2 months of phone service? You think bottled water is a product, something a company makes. You picture a spring, a mountain, a factory that does something to the water. You assume you're paying for the work, the sourcing, the purifying, the science in the little plastic bottle. That's the story on the label. Cool blue glaciers, crisp alpine fonts, a snow-capped peak you will never visit. It feels earned. It feels like a price for effort. But here's the thing. Almost none of what you pay has anything to do with the water itself. The water is the part nobody charged for. Water isn't manufactured. Nobody invents it. It falls from the sky, for free. It soaks into the ground and collects in aquifers, giant underground reservoirs of rock and sand and trapped rain. Those aquifers sit under farms, under towns, under your house. Some of them have been filling, drop by drop, for thousands of years. The water in your local aquifer might be older than the town built on top of it. Think about that. The factory that made it was the last ice age, and an aquifer doesn't refill on a human schedule. It refills on geologies. Pump it faster than the rain replaces it, and the level just drops, quietly, for everyone who shares it. And legally, in most places, that groundwater isn't anyone's private stock. It's a commons, shared by everyone who lives above it, which raises an uncomfortable problem for anyone who wants to sell it. How do you put a price tag on something that already belongs to everybody? Be beat. You own the water. Read that again. The water in the aquifer is, in principle, yours, and your neighbors, and the whole town's. No one bought the rain, no one earned the reservoir, no one filed an invention claim on groundwater. So how does a private company end up owning millions of gallons of a thing that belongs to everyone? It doesn't buy the water. It can't. There's no price tag on a commons. It buys something much cheaper. It buys a permit. Let's go to Michigan, a small town called Evart, in Osceola County. Quiet wells. Ordinary groundwater. Nothing special about it. Nestlé, through its Ice Mountain brand, set up pumps there. A quick note, because it matters. Nestlé later sold its North American bottled water business, Ice Mountain included, to a company called Blue Triton in 2021. But the permit story you're about to hear unfolded on Nestlé's watch. At one point, the operation asked the state to let it draw up to 400 gallons a minute. Do the arithmetic on that. 400 gallons, every minute, around the clock. That's around 576,000 gallons in a single day. Out of the ground, into trucks, onto shelves 3 states away. Each tanker rolls out full. Picture the line of them, load after load, leaving a town of fewer than 2,000 people every single day. The aquifer never sends an invoice for what left inside it. Hundreds of millions of gallons a year from one rural well. Run those pumps day after day, and the total climbs past 200 million gallons in a single year. Enough water to matter to every farm and stream and faucet downhill from it. And for the water itself, the company paid the public essentially nothing. Here's the part that should bother you. When Nestlé asked to nearly double the pumping rate, the public got to comment. And they did. The state received over 80,000 comments against the increase. For it, around 75. 80,000? No. 75? Yes. The state approved it anyway. Read that ratio one more time. The people who lived above the water lost a 1,000 to 1 vote about their own water, because the law was never really asking them. It was asking the paperwork, and the paperwork said yes. So what did the company actually pay for all that water? About $200 a year. That's the number. A small annual permit fee paid to the state. There was a one-time application fee of around $5,000 to set it up. But the fee that comes back year after year is roughly $200. No per-gallon charge for the groundwater going into the bottles. No royalty to the town. No rent to the people above the aquifer. The water, the thing in the bottle, the thing you pay $1 for, was free at the source. You read that correctly. The commodity costs the company zero. It pays for permission, not for water. And permission, it turns out, is dirt cheap. About what many people pay for 2 months of phone service, for an entire year of a town's groundwater. Now let's price it from the company's side. Pumping water out of the ground isn't literally free. There's electricity, pipes, trucks, labor, but it's almost free. Industry estimates put the cost of extracting and bottling at a fraction of a cent per gallon, somewhere around half a cent. Call it 0.5 of 1 cent for a whole gallon of water. A gallon is about 8 standard bottles. So the water inside a $1 bottle, it cost the company a tiny sliver of a single penny, less than the price of the cap that seals it, less than the glue on the label, less than the ink that printed the mountain you'll never visit. Beat half a cent in, $1 out. That's the whole machine in one line. Half a cent of water goes in, $1, or $1.29, comes out. That's roughly a 200 to 1 markup on the water itself. Everything between those two numbers is plastic, branding, shipping, and shelf space. The water is the cheapest ingredient in the bottle of water, cheaper than the cap, cheaper than the label glue, and yet the water is the only reason you bought it. Nobody buys a bottle for the plastic. Here's where it gets dark. While one part of Michigan was pumping cheap groundwater for resale, another part of Michigan couldn't drink from its own taps. Flint, a city whose water got poisoned with lead. Residents lined up for bottled water, paying retail by the case, carrying it up the stairs, bathing their kids with it. Meanwhile, roughly a couple of hours' drive away, a corporation drew clean groundwater for a permit fee, smaller than a used car. Same state, same water table, same public resource. One group got it for almost nothing. The other paid by the bottle, while their own pipes ran brown. One side of the state hauled water out by the tanker. The other side carried it home by the case. The water didn't choose sides. The paperwork did. So what is this permit really? It's not a purchase. It's a fence. A legal line drawn around a slice of the commons that says, this part is mine to pump now. The fence isn't made of wire. It's made of paper. But it does exactly what a fence does. It decides who gets in. Whoever gets the permit gets to treat shared water as private inventory. The aquifer didn't shrink on paper. The town didn't agree to sell anything. A single document just quietly converted everyone's water into one company's stock. Nobody voted. Nobody was paid out. And we have a name for this exact move. We've done it before, on a massive scale, with land. Centuries ago in England, there were commons, open fields, shared pasture, land that villagers used together by old custom. Nobody owned the meadow. Everybody used it. You grazed your animals there. You gathered wood there for generations. Then came the Enclosure Acts. Thousands of separate laws, well over 4,000 of them, passed between the 1600s and the 1900s. Together, they fenced off something like 6 million acres of common land. Why? Land that had belonged to everyone became the private property of a few. The villagers didn't move. The grass didn't change. The soil was the same. Only the fence was new. And the people who once grazed there for free now paid rent, or left. The meadow had fed those families for generations. After the fence, the same family bought its food from the man who now owned the grass. Suddenly, people had to pay to use what had always been theirs. That's enclosure. And bottled water is secretly the same trick. Run on water instead of grass. Beat. The bottle is a fence. That's the whole metaphor. Hold on to it. The aquifer is the commons. The permit is the Enclosure Act. And the bottle? The bottle is the fence. A little plastic fence you carry to the register. You're not buying water. You're paying the toll to cross back over a fence somebody put around water that was already yours. The genius of it is that the fence is invisible. It feels like you're buying a product. You're actually renting back the commons, one twist cap at a time. Beat. It's just the tap. And it gets more honest than you'd like. Some of the biggest bottled water brands don't even bother with a spring. They use municipal tap water, public water, the same stuff in your kitchen. Major brands owned by the big soda companies are, by their own admission, purified public supplies. One of them was even pushed to print public water source on the label. They take the tap, they filter it, they bottle it, they mark it up. So in some cases, there's no glacier at all. There's a city pipe, the one you already pay for in your water bill. You bought the same water twice. Let's price that second insult. And this is a different markup, so watch the comparison. The half-a-cent number was extraction cost versus the bottle price. This one is tap water versus bottled tap water. Tap water in the United States costs roughly 0.2 of a cent per gallon. Bottled water sells for the rough equivalent of several dollars per gallon once you add up the bottles. That's a markup that can run to around 2,000 times the price of the tap it came from. 2,000 times. For filtering, for plastic, for a font that says pure. You'd never pay 2,000 times for bread. You'd never pay it for milk, or coffee, or gas. But water doesn't feel like a markup. It feels like a necessity, which is exactly why the fence works. So why doesn't the public charge a fair price for its own water? Because the law was written for a world without bottling plants. Old groundwater rules came from an age of farms and hand-dug wells. In some states, the doctrine is brutally simple. If it's under your land, you can pump it. Lawyers literally call it the rule of capture. Whoever pulls the water up first owns it. Take Texas. The courts there still follow what locals nickname the law of the biggest pump. Whoever sinks the deepest well and runs it hardest keeps the water, even when it pulls the level down under the neighbor's land. A rule built for homesteads, handed to industrial pumps. That logic is fine for watering a garden. It's a loophole the size of an aquifer when a corporation backs up a fleet of trucks. The farmer with a bucket and the company with a pipeline live under the same sentence of law, and only one of them can drain a county. The permit stays cheap because nobody updated the price of the commons. The rules never imagined someone would haul it away by the millions of gallons, and the companies pumping it have every reason to keep it that way. Cheap permits, expensive bottles. That gap is the entire business. Beat, a toll booth, not a beverage industry. Now zoom out from one town to a whole country. Americans drink well over 15 billion gallons of bottled water a year. They spend on the order of tens of billions of dollars doing it, somewhere north of 30 billion, on a thing that fell from the sky for free, on a commons that was fenced, permit by cheap permit, town by quiet town. Multiply half a cent in, a dollar out, across billions of bottles. That's not a beverage industry. That's a toll booth, built on water nobody made, built on a fence nobody noticed going up. So here's the reframe. It looked like you were buying a product. You were paying a toll on a commons. It looked like the company sold you water. It sold you permission to drink your own. It looked like a price for purity. It was rent on a fence. The label told you a story about mountains and science. The receipt tells the real story. You paid for the cheapest ingredient in the bottle, at the highest markup in your fridge. Beat. Nobody made the water. That's the line the whole thing rests on. Nobody made it. Nobody earned it. It was already here, already shared, already yours. The only thing anyone made was the fence. The fence is the only thing anyone built, and the only thing you're actually paying for. And once you can see the fence, you can't unsee it. Every blue label, every crisp font, every natural spring, a toll booth in disguise. So back to the question from the very start. Whose water was that? Yours. The town's? The aquifers? The commons? And how did pumping it get so cheap? Because the company never paid for the water. It paid about $200 a year for the right to fence it. Then it sold the inside of that fence back to you, one bottle at a time. And remember, that $200 permit is one thing. The markups are something else entirely. Roughly 200 to 1 on the water it pumps from the ground. Around 2,000 times on the tap water it merely filters. Half a cent of water. $1 of toll. That's the hidden economics of the thing in your hand. None of this means water in a bottle is useless. Sometimes the tap really is broken. Ask Flint. Sometimes you really do need it to go. But next time you twist that cap, notice what you actually bought. Not water. Water is free. Water is the commons. You bought a fence. And the permission to climb back over it. The aquifer never had an owner. It just had a permit. And that permit cost about what you'd pay for a couple of months of phone service. So the real question isn't why Nestlé pays almost nothing for the water it sells you. It's why we all agreed to pay so much to get ours back.